I never felt like dying is a particularly great idea. Initially, I decided to study medicine, not necessarily to just become a doctor, but to go into research. So all my medical career, as much as possible, was always focused on research. I then went into cancer research and then kind of did a bit of a detour running tech companies. And while doing all of that, I was always keeping an eye on what the longevity field does. I came back to biostasis then because I felt like the longevity field is not progressing enough. For better or for worse, cryopreservation, of course, is something that you can do today. The one big advantage of cryopreservation is it's more of an engineering problem than it is a research problem. So the complexity is to a degree, not the revival part. The revival part is also very, very difficult. But the putting someone into cryopreservation with high quality, that's more an engineering problem than it is a research problem. Before you go to freezing temperatures, you replace all the blood and all the water in the body against pretty much a medical-grade antifreeze solution, a cryoprotective agent. And with that solution, you now can cool down. And I know that this topic is always being called freezing people, but it's explicitly not freezing anything. The technical term is vitrifying.
And you have an eternity available to you.
At some point, in theory, yes. There's no end date. So you indeed have almost indefinite time to figure out how to do the revival process. So we have the cooling down is pretty simple, right?
Oh.
I'm not saying it's easy, but at least there are no fundamental problems anymore. The warming up part, it's more on a conceptual stage. Small things are very easy to warm up because they have a large surface area to the volume. But humans, in comparison to small things, have a non-beneficial ratio of surface area to volume. So when you try to warm them up, right, the outside would already be too hot while the inside is still a clump of ice.
Yeah, I cannot stand the temptation to think about a pizza or something that you took out of the freezer.
Oh, it's the same fundamental problem.
And put into the oven.
Yeah, it's the same fundamental problem. Uniform warming is a difficult physics problem.
Podcast and your host, Renegade Science. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media. Cryopreservation. This is a process when cells, organs, or an entire body is frozen at very low temperatures to preserve the biomaterial for an extended period of time. Actually, humans did not invent this process. It exists in nature. As an example, tardigrades are able to survive freezing by replacing most of their internal water with a specific type of sugar. In humans, cryopreservation is widely used in IVF procedures. It is now perfectly possible to freeze sperm and human embryos at the very early stage and later use them to make a woman conceive. But scientists went much further and created cryonics. The idea is to freeze human remains in a hope to resurrect a person in the future when technology will be more advanced.
All our patients stored, currently 199 humans, plus almost 100 pets. So they're not really dead, they're just legally dead. They're not biologically dead, obviously, because you can donate all kinds of organs that are still viable and keep other people alive. It just means that something critical has failed that we can't fix today.
Some people firmly believe in this tag. Some are skeptical. Anyway, the first human corpse to be frozen with the hope of future resurrection was James Bedford's, a few hours after his cancer-caused death in 1967. Bedford is the only cryonics corpse frozen before 1974, which is still frozen today. There are several companies in the world that offer the services of cryopreservation. The only one that operates in Europe is Tomorrow Bio. And today, I meet with their CEO, Dr.Emil Kendziorra. Let's find out how far technology of cryopreservation evolved these days, and is it possible to escape death? And we're live. Hello, Emil.
Hi. Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So I'm very excited to welcome you as a guest because I'm personally very interested in the fields of biostasis and cryopreservation. And I would like to ask you how it happened that you got interested in biostasis and longevity.
Right. So in longevity, I was always interested. So this was, in fact, why I studied medicine in the first place. So this is, when I was 18, 19, somewhere in that ballpark, actually maybe even a year earlier, that it might even have been 16, 17. I never felt like dying is a particularly great idea. Both because I like life. I always liked life my whole life, and I still do, right? I'm very curious what the future might hold and so on, right? And of course, as everybody knows, if there's no fundamental change anytime soon, well, everybody who's currently alive has somewhere around, let it be 85, 90, 95, but not significantly longer. And so a good part of the future, right, whatever happens in 100 years from now, you will, again, if nothing changes, unfortunately not experience. So this was never a particularly great idea for me. So it's not like I started out thinking about cryopreservation or biostasis, but I started out thinking about longevity. Of course, longevity now is a big field. Back then it was not. So initially I decided to study medicine, not necessarily to just become a doctor, but to go into research. So all my medical career, as much as possible, was always focused on research. I then went into cancer research, and then kind of did a bit of a detour running tech companies. And while doing all of that, I was always keeping an eye on what the longevity field does. So initially, I started to run tech companies that had nothing to do with longevity, because at that point, which was in the early 2012, 2013, I didn't really see anything in longevity where I felt like it has a high impact. And I came back to biostasis then because I felt like the longevity field is not progressing enough. Meaning, I'm not saying they're not making progress. Of course, there's consistent progress and there's more progress than in the past, but at least it doesn't look likely that they're going to figure it out anytime soon. And for better or for worse, cryopreservation, of course, is something that you can do today.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I know that you left the cancer research because you worked in cancer research for 5 years, and you left the field because it moved too slowly. So it was also too slowly in longevity. So is the evolution of cryonics really faster than cancer research?
So it's faster in regards to, so maybe not faster than cancer, or I wouldn't, at least I would feel like it's very difficult to compare. So the one thing that kind of made me disillusioned for cancer research and also indirectly for longevity, it's not necessarily the absolute speed of progress, but the difference between how fast progress is and how optimistic the field was in predicting how much progress they're going to make. So if we take the cancer field, for example, right, every 10 years they say it's another 10 years, kind of, right? And in 2005 they had these, and of course I bring this up quite often as an example. They had what they called the Director's Challenge, where the goal of the National Cancer Institute in America was to cure cancer by 2015. And of course, as everybody knows, 2015 is now almost 10 years ago. And of course, we're far, far away from curing cancer. So this divergence between predicting how fast progress will be and how fast progress actually is, that kind of made me a bit more afraid that, I'm going to be 85 at some point and we're not going to have any major longevity drugs available. And now the one big advantage of cryopreservation is, I would say it has 2 advantages and then one more why I am personally working on it. So one big advantage is it's more of an engineering problem than it is a research problem. So the complexity is to a degree, not the revival part. The revival part is also very, very difficult. But the putting someone into cryopreservation with high quality That's more an engineering problem than it is a research problem. The second reason is you can do it right now. So that's a big advantage, at least for people who are dying right now. Because, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands and millions of people dying over the next couple of years, right? Millions and millions, in fact. And even if there's great longevity tech around in 10 years, it's not going to help them. And then last but not least, since it's a smaller field, my personal impact in that field is much, much bigger than if I would run another longevity company.
That makes sense. And I have hundreds of questions now.
Go ahead, please.
But first, tell me how your current company, Tomorrow Biostasis, renamed to Tomorrow Bio, was founded.
Yeah, so Tomorrow Bio came about in early 2020. So basically, I founded it during COVID times. So I sold my last tech company in around that time, and I was already, like, my co-founder then ran the company until it being sold, right? And I was on the board, but I was not day-to-day active anymore, because around 2019, I talked to my board and said, I'm going to go back to do what I really want to do which is longevity, right? And then I decided for cryopreservation, as we just discussed. I initially started a non-profit foundation in Switzerland that does biomedical research and runs a research institute in Switzerland. And then at some point we said, so foundations are very good for research and making sure that there's a long-term alignment. But from a day-to-day perspective, foundations are very clunky. They have boards, it's like difficult to make decisions and so on. Everything is a bit slow, which is not really great for running a fast-moving tech company. So based on that, we decided that we need an operative day-to-day company, which then became Tomorrow Bio, to basically offer that service, to offer these cryopreservation services from A to Z, and at the same time do a lot of research.
And if I'm not mistaken, you are the only company in Europe that does cryo.
Yeah, so we're currently the only player in Europe. In fact, there's only very few players in the world, right? There's like 5 relevant organizations that do cryopreservations. We're the only one in Europe. We're now launching in the US, but Europe we're the one player, which I don't even super like. So it would be nice if there would be a couple more organizations, right? Competition usually helps driving everybody forward, and it's not really a field where so all the other organizations and companies and foundations we're good friends with. So it's not really a competition market. It's more so a pioneer market and a market education being important. The other organizations, we do research projects together, we collaborate and so on. So it's more like friendly competition.
Yeah, obviously it's still a blue ocean and will stay a blue ocean. Well, maybe not forever since, but for many, many years, obviously, because there are only, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 people, cryopreserved now.
It's in fact much smaller. So cryopreserved is somewhere between 500 and 600 people who are already in cryopreservation, and then somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 are currently signed up to be cryopreserved should something happen to them. Of course, my goal is to make that number much higher, or at least communicate the topic in a way where I would argue maybe more people would decide that this is something that they would like to do. But until we get into really high numbers, this might take a bit of time.
Yeah, obviously. Could you please explain me step by step how the process of putting a person in a biostasis happens?
Sure, no, happy to. So the fundamental logic of cryopreservation is that when the heart stops, the body is not supplied with oxygen anymore. And of course, in our case, most importantly, the brain is not supplied with oxygen anymore. So what happens now is that on a cellular level, the cells start to basically self-recycle. It's like an active process almost. Or it is in fact an active process. Now, for cryopreservation, the idea is that if you keep the body around, and as much as we currently understand, the parts that make you, you, and the parts that make me, me, are the connections and the weights of those connections and so on in our brain. So that is what identity is made of. That's what personality is made of. That's what memories are being made of, and so on. So as long as you keep that part around, it is imaginable that in the future, at some point, you can be resuscitated. So what you do in the cryopreservation procedure, the second the doctor, so you never do cryopreservation if you just want to do it. You only do this if the doctors have told the patient, you have a terminal condition, there's nothing we can do to save you, let it be terminal cancer or heart disease or whatever it is, right? And then as a last-ditch effort, where the alternative would be cremation or burial, in those circumstances, the people can say, I'd rather be cryopreserved. Now, you need to basically now keep the body keep the body without that degradation that starts when the heart stops. So what you initially do, you do chest compressions, you give oxygen, and so on. You don't do this because you do this after the patient has been legally pronounced already. You don't do this to revive the patient. You do it to supply the cells in the body, and most importantly, again, in the brain, with enough oxygen so that these degradation processes are slower. At the same time, you start cooling, which also reduces these degradation processes because they're energy dependent. They're basically dependent on the metabolism, and cooling reduces the speed of the metabolism. Now, once you're doing that, you cool down further and the metabolism goes slower and slower and slower. And before you cross 0 degrees Celsius, so before you go to freezing temperatures, you replace all the blood and all the water in the body against pretty much a medical grade antifreeze solution, a cryoprotective agent. And with that solution, you now can cool down. And I know that this topic is always being called freezing people, but it's explicitly not freezing anything. The technical term is vitrifying. So you vitrify the tissue to then, once you go to around negative 140 degrees, you cross into that vitrified state, which is kind of an amorphous glass-like state, at which there's no degradation anymore, there's no aging, just nothing happens. And now the goal would be to maintain that state. And what you need to do for that is basically just keep the temperature low for, I don't know, a couple of decades, maybe 50 years, maybe 100 years, maybe longer. No one knows, and I don't either. Until 3 things have happened. Until the underlying condition, let it be the cancer again, is curable. Until technology has advanced enough so that cryopreservation is reversible. And last but not least, until the person who would then be woken up, however old they are, has a relevant amount of remaining years of life left when they're being resuscitated in the future, revived in the future with that new technology. And then it's not a guarantee, it's just a chance. So the only thing I'm comfortable saying is that the chance is definitely much, much, much better than in cremation, but I can't say how exactly high it is. But that's the core logic and why people do that.
Well, obviously, having a chance to be revived, to resurrect, is better than eternal death.
I would say so.
And that was a new knowledge for me. So not every person who wants to be cryopreserved can just freely do that. You need to have a terminal condition.
So not necessarily a terminal condition, but you need to die due to whatever it is, right? So you cannot just say today, I would like to be cryopreserved because, I don't know, I want to skip the next 20 years. So it is only possible if someone dies and the alternative would be cremation or burial. So the common cause is terminal conditions. So most people are not dying in accidents. They die due to cancer, heart disease, diabetes, whatever. Right. So that's the very common case. In the end, for us, it does not really matter how the person dies, as long as we get if we are being handed over, if we get access to the body, and the attending doctor has signed that the person has legally died, right, and the body has been released. So if that's the case, then what happens before that, that's not up to us. We are not involved in that. In fact, we're not touching the body at all until we have the death certificate, right, and the body has been released to us. But once that happens, then of course our medical teams jump into action and make sure that the person is cryopreserved with the best possible quality.
How quickly you need to jump in to ensure that the quality is highest?
Yeah, so ideally as quick as possible, right? So there's at the time, the second the heart stops, right, this degradation process starts. With current technology, you can resuscitate someone a couple minutes after heart stops, like 6 minutes, 8 minutes, depends a bit, maybe a bit longer. If you cool down, there have been cases where someone has been resuscitated after an hour of not having had a heartbeat, right? So relatively long. And of course, we put that to the extreme. But for best possible cryopreservation, it should be done as quick as possible. Of course, as I said, only always once legal pronouncement, once the person has legally pronounced dead, but then as quick as possible. So in a standard case, our teams are on site before the person dies. And then the second the doctors release the patient to us, they release the body to us, then we immediately get started.
It looks like a challenge in logistics.
It is. So cryopreservation is definitely, it's like whatever, 30% logistics or something like that. Like it's actually something that we think about a lot, where do we have teams? How can we fly in teams if need be, and so on and so on. So it's kind of this, it's a field where you have logistics, where you have cryobiology, where you have medicine and so on. So kind of the overlap of these kind of fields, and logistics being definitely an important one.
Absolutely. And I know that you have even cryopreservation ambulances, and some people even had a chance to see them.
Yeah, both, absolutely. So this is one partially how we solve that logistics problem, right? So we have 3 of these ambulances here in Europe. We have another 3 through a partner in the US, where if something happens or something is about to happen to someone, then we send one of these ambulances with one of our teams to wherever the patient is. And then, we wait until we're ready, right? Or like until we can take over and do the procedure in the ambulance on site. At least we can do that. And then move the patient back once the procedure has already almost completely done to Switzerland, where then you have time. So you just need to do the initial stages quick, and then more and more time. The further you cool down, the more and more time you gain.
Then you have an eternity available to you.
At some point, in theory, yes. So as long as we are able to maintain the stability of the organization and the financial stability, and of course there's a lot of fail-safes on that side as well, then in theory you can maintain cryostasis. It doesn't matter. It can be maintained for hundreds or thousands of years, right? So from a cryostasis standpoint, there is technically no endpoint of when potential revival must work, or there's no end date. So you indeed have almost indefinite time to figure out how to do the revival process.
You mentioned something very interesting to me. You said that one of advantages of cryopreservation is that it poses mostly engineering challenges. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so cryopreservation by and large has 2 main problems. One of them is almost pretty much solved, the other one not so much yet. So if you cool down very, very quick to cryogenic temperatures, and then once you can, warm up very, very quick from cryogenic temperatures, then a lot of the other problems just go away. So normally you have problems with ice crystal formation and toxicity and so on and so on. But if you do it very, very quick, cool down and very, very quick warm up, then all of these problems pretty much go away. Not 100%, but almost. And in quotation marks, just cooling and just warming, from a complexity of the problem, it's relatively simple, right? It's an engineering problem. Whereas in longevity, these are research problems, understanding the biology, right? And tinkering with the biology and maybe changing the biology and so on, right? These are hyper complex systems that, any change you make here has 20,000 other changes then make the system potentially unstable and so on. So I'm not saying fundamentally longevity will not achieve its goal at some point. At some point this is going to work, right? And you will figure out, probably humanity will figure out at some point how to change biology in a way so that people can live significantly longer. My main contention is with the timelines. So I think it sounds to me currently that I don't see any clear indication why I should be optimistic that this will be around anytime soon. So I work on cryopreservation because, again, like the complexity space is probably smaller because it mostly being engineering challenges.
So we already know not only how to cool down the entire body quickly enough, it's liquid nitrogen, but also how to warm it up back.
Yeah.
Do we?
So we have the cooling down is pretty simple, right?
Oh.
I'm not saying it's easy, but at least there are no fundamental problems anymore. So the cooling, the speed of cooling that you need to achieve, you can achieve with current technology. The warming up part, it's more on a conceptual stage. So this is not something that you can currently readily do with a whole human. You can do it in very small volumes, like in worms and small organs and so on. But the warming up part is more difficult. The reason basically being that a human is comparatively relatively big. So small things are very easy to warm up because they have a large surface area to the volume. But humans, in comparison to small things, have a non-beneficial ratio of surface area to volume. So when you try to warm them up, right, the outside would already be too hot while the inside is still a clump of ice. So you need to warm up uniformly, right? And that's quite difficult to do. Even though there is technology like nano rewarming, like dielectric warming, like high frequency ultrasound rewarming and so on. So there are conceptual ideas, and some of them already validated in small volumes that can achieve that uniform fast warming. So again, engineering, not saying anything of that is easy, but it is easier.
Yeah, I cannot stand the temptation after you said the outside part is already too warm and the inside is still ice, to think about, I don't know, like pizza or something that you took out of the freezer.
No, it's the same fundamental problem.
And put into the oven.
Yeah, it's the same fundamental problem that uniform warming is a difficult physics problem, right? We have all the radiation or conduction or convection, right? All of these heating methodologies that we normally have, they usually just warm up the outside and then wait until the heat is being, until it migrates kind of towards the inside, right? Whereas in cryopreservation, and if you want to do it uniform, you need to warm up at every point almost at the same time, right? And it's a challenge, and therefore we need these new warming methodologies.
Interesting. So practically it's a problem of physics, not of medicine.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's a bit of a simplification. There's also research and medicine problems, right? But by and large, it has a large chunk of the issues and things that need to be solved are more in the realm of physics and engineering than they are in research in medicine.
I've once seen a huge map of different technologies in longevity. What was there? I think it was a Forever Tomorrow Institute or whatever. And I was surprised how far we went through the route of cryopreservation compared to other technologies. That was really thrilling.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And also I know that Laura Deming got quite a significant investment this year after she demonstrated the recovery of electrical activity in neural tissue. So there are definitely some great advancements in the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like it's very cool. I'm very happy that new people get involved in the space. To be fair, a couple of these things were already shown in the past, so it's not that much of a new thing. But new people cryopreservation is a very small field, so new people getting into that field, it's very helpful. Like I'm absolutely all for it. That over time that becomes a more serious, a bigger research field with more collaboration partners and so on and so on.
Why do you think it's so small?
So, longevity is not big either, right? So all of these fields are relatively new fields, at least comparatively. So the reason I think why cryopreservation within the field of longevity is relatively small is because I think there's probably two main things, maybe three. So one is definitely that, a company saying, hey, just take my pill, or what Brian Johnson says, just eat my olive oil and do gym and take some supplements. Of course, I'm simplifying. And you're gonna live happily ever after. That sounds like a significantly easier solution, right? Than saying, okay, you're being cryopreserved, and then maybe in the future you're being woken up, right? And so on. So from a value proposition standpoint, I think some other companies it sounds easier, right? The other reason being that from a financial standpoint, from an investment standpoint, if you try to make a drug that even lets someone live 1 year longer, that would be a tremendous financial, it would be the best-selling drug ever, probably, right? So it would be a huge financial success. Whereas 1 year living 1 year longer is super amazing. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's not really solving the problem of aging by any means, right? So whereas cryopreservation, at this historically, so few people have done it, and it's probably a bit of a chicken egg problem, that from a no one has figured out yet how to make large amounts of money with cryopreservation. Meaning there are few investors who are interested in the space and so on. Even though this is getting much better, and the type of investors that invest in us are very pioneering investors and people who are very much into like moonshots and are willing to take risks on high impact things, which I think is which is very great. And then last but not least, I think it's a topic where a lot of people, few people like to think about dying. It's not something that a lot of people think about all day long, right? Probably more people should think about it because, everybody who listens here who doesn't have a cryopreservation contract, implicitly, all these people have chosen to be either cremated or buried, right? And if you think about that, being cremated or buried is not a great thought either. Arguably, it's a worse thought even than cryopreserved, right? If you really think about it. So I think these topics together, or these reasons together, combine into that cryopreservation is not yet a topic where a lot of people think about, all day long. So, but of course, again, by going on podcasts like that, by talking to interviewers, by going on TV and so on, we try to move this topic a bit more into the mainstream in quotation marks, where at least people then think about it and can make up their mind and decide if this is for them or if it's not.
It's always nice to have a choice. So who are the people who choose to be your clients?
So it's usually people. So all of them are they're very positive in life usually, right? They like living, right? Like usually most of the people who sign up with us, the overwhelming majority are people who are absolutely healthy. They just do it as an insurance, right? They're somewhere between usually around 35 and 45, so relatively young even, who just say, if something happens to me, then I'd rather be cryopreserved than buried or cremated. Sometimes, so we have kind of these two groups. So this is the one group, and the other group are people who contact us when they have either they themselves or one of their family members has been diagnosed with a terminal condition, and where the doctors have told them that the person is going to unfortunately die in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, right? And usually those people are also people who are relatively young, not saying 20, but maybe 60 or 50 or 70. It's usually not the 95-year-olds, even though that's also totally fine, and there is no age limit on our end. So this is kind of the two main groups when people reach out to us.
Have you already cryopreserved some animals?
Yeah, we have. We didn't initially expect that too much, but now there's more and more people who reach out to us to have mostly their dogs and cats cryopreserved, which of course makes sense if you have been living with your pet or with your cat or dog for the last 15 years or 10 years, right? I mean, like all the power to you if you would like to do that. So that's of course totally fine. So that happens more and more. It has actually become quite a bit of our activity.
Yeah, unexpected, that's for sure. But here you are competing with cloning, probably.
Yeah, to some degree, I guess, but also not really. So I mean, cloning. If you value your cat, right, and not just a similar cat, or your dog and not just a similar dog, right? Cloning gives you a similar dog. Cryopreservation potentially gives you your dog that has all the memories and knows you and all of that, which of course arguably is a bit of a different value proposition than cloning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different beast.
Yeah.
I need my hamster and my dog.
Yeah, to a degree. I understand. I mean, I understand both to some degree, but
although there is a dilemma of lifespan versus. Oops. Did I lose you?
I don't know. I can hear you.
Yeah. All good. Yeah,
cool.
Now it's
perfect.
all good.
I think Riverside handled this locally, so I think it should be all fine.
Yeah, it should be okay. So what always made me curious about cryopreservation, as in fact, people die, as you said, after having a terminal condition, or they die when they are old and they have all this scope of age-related diseases. So probably many of these people would love to have a chance to resurrect somewhere in the future, but they will have to be resurrected, being old and ill. And this is quite sad. I mean, since you cannot go and be cryopreserved when you are beautiful and, when you are, I don't know, like 40 or 45, so you have these problems down the road that we not only need to revive a person, but we also need to cure her from aging and illnesses. And that sounds already quite complex.
And it is. But fundamentally, I don't think that's probably not going to be too much of an issue, right? Again, you can rejuvenate mice right now, right, with a different range of interventions. So I imagine, and of course, everything I'm saying about the future is always highly speculative, right? I don't know, and it might not happen like that. But I think there's a good argument to be made that at some point, we're going to figure out how to rejuvenate humans as well. And of course, as I said, one of the factors where you would wait until those factors are achieved before you bring someone back from cryostasis would be that they have a relevant amount of remaining years of life left. So you would wait until the 85-year-old can be rejuvenated enough so that they have A, good quality of life, and B, have, a good amount of remaining years life left.
Yeah, but what to do if at some point the company goes bankrupt or whatever? So what happens?
So
I'm worried about, but not your company, Alcor. Let's say Alcor goes bankrupt.
No, I mean, it's also a possibility with us, right? It's not like everything can go out of business. But it's important to state that the long-term storage is not with the company. It is with a non-profit foundation, right? It's a non-profit foundation in Switzerland that is set up to maximally optimize stability and safety from a financial standpoint, from a location standpoint, from a governance standpoint, and so on, where, of course, none of this is a guarantee, but it is at least a much higher chance, I think, than if it would be done with a company. In fact, I think no one should be cryopreserved with companies, meaning the long-term storage should not be done by companies. Companies are not good at doing the same thing for 100 years. With foundations have a significantly better track record in that regard. So I think foundations are as good as possible from a structural perspective what you can currently build. It's just none of it is ever a guarantee, but I think it's the best possible thing that you can do.
Yeah, that's a smart business model, I would say, and it definitely gives some more security to people who decide to be cryopreserved. I'm sure that they all ask these questions.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a topic that we discuss a lot.
I've read on your Medium that you believe that biostasis is an actually ultimate moonshot. Why? And you said today that VCs start to acknowledge that. So first, why? And do you think that any other areas are also really, really prominent in bio?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I would say it's definitely a moonshot in regards to that. This is not something that will be like, a 5-year company and then you will have achieved what you wanted to do, right? So this is solving cryopreservation will be a very long-term, it's a long-term endeavor. So I think moonshot-like it's a big goal, it's a complex goal, it will take time, and so on. So I think from that point of view, it is a moonshot. Luckily, more and more investors, not so much VCs, so not so much institutional money, but more so family offices and high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals are currently going into that space. So that's of course very promising. And then in bio, I mean, there's a lot of highly interesting stuff in bio. I just work on cryopreservation because I think it has the best value proposition for the least amount of complexity. But all the other stuff, like the partial reprogramming, all of these other topics are highly interesting to me, right? I don't think nothing. It's just so that, of course, I would argue from a limited research budget and resource allocation consideration, a bit more money should go into cryopreservation. But of course, I'm slightly biased here. But other than that, everything else is highly interesting, and some of them also moonshots.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good sign. But you just touched the point of a price. Mm-hmm. So as far as I know, putting a person in biostasis is quite expensive, around 200,000, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is. So this.
currently it's mostly seen as,
Yeah, so there's two types of prices. So when you sign up with us, right, you pay 50 euros a month. So basically you have a membership subscription. You pay that while you're alive until you're being cryopreserved. And at that point, there's a one-time payment of 200,000 euros currently. It might go up in the future, hopefully goes down. But at the current moment, if someone needs to be cryopreserved right now, it would be 200,000. Now, this is definitely not cheap. The reason, unfortunately, why this is so expensive is that very few people currently do it. And then the other part is that a larger part of that money, around 120,000, is being put aside at this nonprofit foundation in Switzerland that invests that money and pays for the annual cost to keep you in cryopreservation out of the return. The reason to do that is because if you can keep that return, which is a very small return, so it should be always possible, then you can maintain cryostasis indefinitely. Of course, very few, if anybody, is wiring 200,000 euros to us. In fact, we don't want, we would need to put it in a truster account, so we don't even like if anybody wants to do this. So almost everybody who would like to be cryopreserved and who signs up with us takes out life insurance. So they take out a life insurance policy, and then should the person die within the coverage period of that life insurance policy, then the policy basically is being paid out to us, and that policy pays then for the cryopreservation.
This is super interesting. All this internal kitchen. Wow.
Yeah. So that's the the
actually it's quite affordable.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it is affordable on a monthly basis, right? Like with the life insurance policy, you pay. I think most of the people who signed up with us, they pay the 50 euros to us, and then maybe another 30 or so to the life insurance policy. Depends, of course, on age and how old you are and so on. But in the end, it is still 200,000 euros, even though if you paid through life insurance, right? The life insurance, of course, has a financial model behind it. So it's not cheap. One of the goals of the company is to make it more affordable, right? So we have 3 goals in the company, 3 high-level goals: make it more affordable, make it better from a quality perspective, and make it more accessible from a coverage perspective. But it will take a while until we actually can make it more affordable. So for the time being, those prices are unfortunately as high as they are.
And I think that the biggest bottleneck here for making it affordable is actually the bandwidth. I mean, probably you have your storage site, yeah, and it can maybe accommodate few thousand people, yeah? Mm-hmm. Am I right?
We can currently more on the 1,000 to 2,000 range. But we can, so if you think about that, currently there's around 500 people, 600 worldwide cryopreserved, right? Then having even 1,000 people is already a good amount. And then we can expand our facility. And then after expanding, we can, the storage facility cost itself is relatively cheap. So you can just build another facility somewhere else.
So it's a scalable business model.
It is fundamentally scalable. It's like, apart from the medical teams, which of course make scaling, you need medical teams, but there is no part where I would see any fundamental problems in scaling.
I know that you run many research studies. Are they all focused on cryo?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
Yeah, they're all focused on cryo. So everything we do at Tomorrow Bio and at the European Biostasis Foundation and so on is purely cryo focused. So, and within cryo focus, most of it is brain focused. So neural preservation. Sometimes research, there might be some adjacent topics, but it's mostly of how to preserve the brain with higher quality, with better quality metrics, how potentially might revival work in the future, and so on, so on. It's always that direction that we're looking into.
So, and which advancements we see in these studies already?
Yeah, so in research, of course, the advances are usually, it's like small details here and there, right? That then all together kind of make the advance relevant. So we are mostly working on faster cooling. We're working on quality metrics, and have found some new quality metrics that I think that are interesting. We have a few new cooling methodologies that we implemented this year and last year. The next thing will be how to open the so-called blood-brain barrier to have cryoprotective agents go from the vessels into the tissue. Better that there's this special lining of vessels in the brain that is called the blood-brain barrier, which currently makes it more difficult for cryoprotective agents to go from the vessel into the tissue. So that is one research project. There's no definitive results as of yet. I think these are kind of the main topics that we're currently either working on or will publish soon. Couple of other ones are so-called ITS, intermediate temperature storage doors, where you store at a slightly different temperature, what gives you some advantages. These are kind of the topics.
This all is very, very exciting. But I also know that you are planning to organize a huge longevity conference in 2025.
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Because so this whole field, so with around 10% of my time or so, I'm happy to dedicate to, the weekends basically, or like part of the weekend. I'm happy to dedicate to topics that are adjacent to what we do at tomorrow, right? So longevity is still a very small field, right? And cryopreservation within that. So again, part of my work is there to just, broaden the field, make the field itself, help the field on a meta level kind of. And this longevity conference that we're organizing called Life Summit is in that direction, right? So that's why we do that. It's going to be absolutely mainstream longevity conference. So it's not even going to be research focused per se or biotech focused. There will also be nutrition and performance and supplements and mental health and so on to just move this field forward, to give this field more mainstream appeal and so on. So if anybody's interested, check out lifesummit.berlin. It's going to be probably the biggest longevity conference in the world. And if anybody's interested in that, in the non-biotech part of longevity, then that might be a good fit.
But will cryopreservation mentioned there? Will there
mentioned?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, mentioned probably yes, but not as a. It's definitely not one of the main topics. So it's more mainstream. But I'm going to be there, so if someone wants to join, then we can definitely talk about cryopreservation there as well.
Are you going to invite all the longevity OGs like Aubrey de Grey? Yeah, who else is there? Brian Johnson, Adam Grease.
Yeah, so I'm not that day-to-day involved. I'm still, of course, helping and so on. But so the exact details of who is all on our speaker list right now, I don't know. But yes, like a good amount of the people you just mentioned are either already in or will probably join. So I assume a good amount of those will actually join.
That sounds brilliant. So everyone who cares about longevity and wants to know more and dive into the field, yes, please join. So, and I have my last question. Mm-hmm. Will you personally be cryopreserved after your death?
Absolutely. So I mean, I think the best way to think about cryopreservation is always to not say, I want to be cryopreserved. I think it's better to say, I'd rather be cryopreserved than the alternatives. So I'm not like, I want to be cryopreserved. I don't work on cryopreservation because I think, yes, I please want to do this next year. Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. But if I'm getting an incurable disease today or tomorrow or in a year or in 10 years or when I'm 85, right, then, and of course you can, at any day of the week, you can change your opinion here, right? There's no minimal contracts or whatever. So it's relatively low risk to just, in quotation marks, just sign up. And then, yeah, but so if something happens to me, then I think the chance that cryopreservation gives you is definitely better than the alternatives. Even though, again, I can't say how high the chance is, I can't say when it works, but I'm very confident in saying it's a better chance than a cremation.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's a bet that many people should just make.
Yeah, at least consider it.
Yes, because life is beautiful.
I would agree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was a brilliant conversation, and I'm wishing you a great evening.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.